Tom Bennett's service medal gleamed under cold hotel lights. Then the sneers started, sharp and venomous, ripping through the polished lobby air. Mocked, humiliated, erased in a place that promised luxury, he faced a silence darker than any battlefield. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Tom Bennett tightened his grip on the strap of his duffel bag as he approached the front desk, the gleam of his service medal catching the soft glow of the chandelier above. The medal was heavy, its surface etched with the years of hardship, pain, and honor he carried within himself. For Tom, it wasn't just metal. It was the echo of firefights in Kandahar, the faces of fallen comrades, the endless nights watching over a hostile land so that others could sleep safely back home. The Crystal Harbor Hotel's lobby stretched out like a palace of modern luxury, all polished marble, glistening brass accents, and an air of quiet exclusivity. But beneath the opulence lurked something colder, something Tom hadn't expected. Derek, the front desk manager, barely lifted his eyes when Tom approached, his practiced smile tight and distant. No nod of acknowledgement, no sign of gratitude or welcome for a man who had worn the uniform and paid a price few could understand. Tom's heart sank as he heard the faint murmur behind him, soft yet unmistakably mocking. He caught the edge of a bellhop's sneer, disguised as a whisper, but sharp as a blade. "Old war relic. Bet he can't even afford the penthouse." The word stung deeper than any bullet wound, cutting through his pride with cruel precision. Tom glanced around, meeting the eyes of several staff members. Their expressions were thinly veiled disdain, a mix of ignorance and elitism that branded him as an outsider, an inconvenient reminder of a past they wanted to gloss over. This wasn't just disrespect, it was a denial of everything he had stood for. Tom had not fought for medals or praise, but for honor, for duty, for something bigger than himself. Yet here, in the heart of the nation's capital, he was reduced to a joke, a curiosity in an environment that traded in luxury and exclusivity. His motivation was simple, yet profound. He sought a measure of dignity, a quiet nod to the sacrifices he had made, a recognition that transcended money or status. Instead, he faced mockery and rejection. Derek's cold professionalism masked something more complicated. Beneath his tailored suits and polished demeanor was a man chained to corporate mandates that demanded the hotel cater to a very specific clientele, wealthy, glamorous, and untarnished by reminders of grit or sacrifice. Veterans like Tom didn't fit that image. They threatened the pristine illusion Crystal Harbor carefully cultivated. To Derek, Tom was a liability, a crack in the facade that could unsettle the delicate balance between exclusivity and luxury. As Tom stood there, a quiet storm of anger swelled within him. It was not the fury of a reckless man, but the smoldering rage of one who had given everything and been met with contempt. The medal on his chest, once a symbol of pride and sacrifice, now felt like a target. How could those who had never faced danger judge him so casually? How could the very place he had hoped would offer respite become a chamber of cruelty? His mind flickered back to Afghanistan. The harsh deserts, the tension before every patrol, the brotherhood forged in fire. Those memories were raw and vivid, yet here they meant nothing to these strangers in their tailored suits and polished shoes. The humiliation was suffocating. Tom's resolve hardened. This was not just a personal slight. It was a challenge to every veteran who had ever been dismissed or forgotten. With a quiet breath, Tom squared his shoulders. He would not let this indignity define him. The Crystal Harbor might mock his medal today, but the story was far from over. The pain of being dismissed was real, but so was the strength that came from standing tall in the face of scorn. And Tom Bennett was nothing if not resilient. Tom Bennett lay awake long after the city's lights dimmed and the Crystal Harbor Hotel quieted, the weight of humiliation pressing down like a physical burden on his chest. The sterile walls of his modest room felt suffocating, a stark contrast to the grandeur he had walked through hours before, where the polished marble floors and gleaming chandeliers had become a stage for mockery rather than respect. Each whispered insult replayed in his mind, the bellhop's sneer, and the staff's barely concealed contempt weaving a bitter tapestry of exclusion and scorn. Yet beneath the ache, something deeper flickered, an ember of defiance that refused to be smothered by their cruelty. The medal pinned to his jacket was no mere trinket. It was a testament carved from blood, sweat, and loss. The faces of fallen brothers and sisters haunted the edges of his consciousness, reminding him that dignity wasn't something granted by strangers in tailored suits. It was earned fiercely and irrevocably. Sarah's voice, calm and steady, pierced through the darkness. "You earned that medal, Tom," she said softly, the conviction in her eyes steady as a lighthouse in a storm. "It's not about them. It's about what you stand for." Her words grounded him, a tether to the truth that no amount of derision could unravel. In her belief, he found renewed strength, a reminder that his identity wasn't defined by others' judgments, but by the sacrifices and courage that medal symbolized. Morning crept in with reluctant light, but Tom's resolve had hardened overnight. He reached out to Jake, his trusted military comrade, who now worked at the Pentagon, a man whose sense of justice burned as fiercely as Tom's own. The phone call crackled with anger and disbelief. Jake's voice was sharp, unyielding. "That's not just disrespect to you," he said, voice low but fierce. "It's disrespect to every veteran who's worn the uniform, bled, and sacrificed. This isn't something we let slide." The connection between them sparked a wildfire. Word of Tom's experience rippled swiftly through the veterans' networks and the tight circles of Washington's insiders. It wasn't just a story about one man's humiliation. It became a rallying cry, a collective demand for respect, recognition, and justice. Veterans from all walks of life lent their voices, their own stories weaving into the growing chorus that refused to be ignored. Then came the unexpected, powerful, and transformative. The White House, a symbol of national authority and pride, intervened. The Chief of Staff reached out personally, extending an invitation that carried the weight of recognition Tom had long yearned for. A special ceremony was being arranged, and more than that, the White House reserved its penthouse suite for Tom, a deliberate, symbolic rebuke to the hotel's earlier contempt. The gesture was more than protocol. It was a statement. Veterans deserved honor, not scorn. Tom's chest tightened with emotion, a complex mixture of gratitude, validation, and renewed purpose flooding through him. The pain of the past hours, the sting of rejection, now mingled with a fierce spark of hope. This was no longer about one man's bruised pride. It was a beacon for every soldier who had stood unseen, unheard, disrespected in quiet corners of the country. In that moment, Tom understood the true battle lay ahead, not in the confines of a single hotel lobby, but in the hearts and minds of a nation still learning to honor its own. The medal on his chest was not just a relic of war, it was a call to action, a demand for respect that would resonate far beyond his own story. And Tom Bennett was ready to fight for that. The day of the ceremony dawned clear and bright, the kind of spring morning that seemed to pulse with promise and weight. Tom Bennett stood inside the White House, the grandeur of the historic room reflecting off the polished surface of his service medal, pinned with deliberate pride to his jacket. The light caught the medal, causing it to glint like a beacon, no longer a silent emblem of sacrifice worn in solitude, but a powerful symbol of courage, dignity, and collective recognition. The atmosphere thrummed with significance, the hum of hushed conversations and soft footsteps reverberating beneath the intricate crystal chandeliers. Tom's posture was unyielding, shoulders squared not just by personal pride, but by the knowledge that he represented a much larger truth, the bravery of countless veterans whose stories often slipped into the shadows. As the president stepped forward, the room fell into a reverent silence. The president's words rang clear and unwavering, cutting through the quiet with forceful compassion. He praised Tom's service, his steadfast courage, and his unyielding dignity in the face of cruelty. The condemnation of the disrespect Tom endured was unequivocal, a public rebuke aimed not only at the individuals who had belittled him, but at a society that had allowed such disrespect to linger in the margins. The effect was immediate and far-reaching. News of the ceremony spread like wildfire, igniting conversations across the nation's media and social platforms. The Crystal Harbor Hotel, once a fortress of exclusivity and elitism, found itself under a harsh spotlight. The backlash was swift and merciless. Derek, the front desk manager whose indifference had stoked the flames of Tom's humiliation, tendered his resignation amidst mounting pressure. The hotel's corporate leadership issued a formal apology, a carefully crafted acknowledgement that fell far short of undoing the damage but promised substantive change. Staff would undergo mandatory sensitivity training focused on veterans' issues, a step toward preventing future indignities. The Penthouse suite, once the object of the bellhop's sneer, became a stark symbol of restored honor when Tom was invited to stay there as the White House's honored guest, his presence transforming the space from a symbol of exclusion into one of inclusion and respect. Tom's story resonated far beyond the gilded halls of power. Invitations flooded in for interviews, panel discussions, and advocacy events. His voice became a clarion call, urging the nation to remember that true luxury was not measured by wealth or status, but by the respect and gratitude extended to those who serve. In speeches, he wove the narrative of dignity and recognition, insisting that veterans' rights were not a privilege, but a fundamental debt owed by a grateful country. Each word was imbued with the authority of lived experience and the passion of a man who had faced scorn and refused to be broken. As twilight settled over Washington, Tom stood on the balcony of the Penthouse suite, the city stretching out before him like a vast, breathing monument to possibility and change. The soft glow of the city lights mingled with the gleam of his service medal, a radiant emblem of resilience and triumph. In that quiet moment, the crushing weight of humiliation that had once threatened to consume him felt distant and diminished. What had begun as an act of deep disrespect had evolved into a beacon of hope and inspiration. Tom Bennett's journey was no longer his alone. It belonged to every veteran who deserved to be seen, honored, and respected. The fight had transformed from a personal battle into a movement, one that promised to shape a future where sacrifice was met with the reverence it truly deserved.